So this next session is really about breeding for improved temperament or improved docility. Temperament's a key factor within breeding programs and modern Angus breeding programs, and so to mention its importance is really not going to receive much opposition. But there's been two bits of recent work that have really highlighted this significance at both an individual bull buying decision level, but also at a breed level when we look at the breed. So the first bit that really highlighted this recent work is the review of the selection indexes. So some of you guys may have been involved in this, and what you'll notice in the table is that docility is number 2 in terms of what came up in terms of importance, with structural soundness being the top one. So that's really interesting to see, and representing that significance. The other bit, as part of Angus Australia has been involved in a large survey that surveyed beef producers across Australia, those using and those not using Angus, to sort of understand a range of things. One of the bits we found as a result, when we looked at those with purebred cow herds, what were the factors influencing their selection of bulls, temperament came back as number 1. So that was, again, really highlighting that importance on an individual bull selection decision level. When we looked at the breed level within that same survey, what we found is that when we looked at the main reason people were using Angus, when we drop down to temperament, what we see is that no one was using Angus for their temperament, so that's something. And when we flip to the reasons why they weren't using Angus or weren't using a higher proportion of Angus, once we get past the actual environmental things, like they're happy with what they're currently using, Angus are not suitable for their environment, or they believe they're not, we get to the first trait we can actually implement within a breeding program, and there's temperament. So these really reinforce that temperament's significant, and in current modern Angus, temperament's important. Luckily though, we can actually make improvements in this area because we have a docility breeding value. Now, the docility EBV is an estimate of the genetic difference between animals for temperament, with a higher docility breeding value representing a bull that will produce a higher proportion of progeny with an acceptable temperament. And that's really important. We're not talking about a higher EBV representing a bull that produces calmer progeny. We're talking about a higher docility EBV resulting in more progeny with an acceptable temperament. So that's really critical, and why the breeding value is represented in percentage units. The value to us really is because an EBV belongs to the progeny, and that means we can make genetic gain and move forward in this space. So really improving docility, because of the way the breeding value is what the breeding value is describing, and the trait itself, is a two-part process. The first is really about culling those animals that have an undesirable temperament. So when we get them, we're culling them out at that point, and then using the breeding value to reduce the number of them in the future generations. So that two-part process enables us to maximize our gains in this area. When we look at the trend within the breed for the trait, what we see is that increasing trend as the breeding value increases, really highlighting that importance in temperament of Angus animals. Recording of the trait, it's an easy to record trait, docility, and it's a subjective assessment done based on the behaviour of the animal in either the crush or the yards. The two options are available to you, where the breeder will actually give a score 1 to 5 based on how the animal behaves, with 1 to 2 being that docile or slightly restless behaviour, through to 4 or 5, which is the flighty or slightly aggressive behaviour. And so when we talk about the breeding value describing an acceptable temperament, we're talking about that 1 to 2 score. It's typically done at the earliest available opportunity when the animals are naive to handling. So we're talking about a window of 60 to 400 days. When When we look at the recording of docility though, it's a bit disappointing in relation to not only the importance of the breed, the trait to the breed and to individual bulls, but also in comparison to other easy to record traits. What we see is that relative to the others recorded at the same time, it doesn't get the same level of recording. So there's a real opportunity to increase that space and really represent the importance of docility. What's the future of docility actually look like? Recording docility is easy, and it's really important that we do it because it adds significant value. So that's definitely worth considering. We're heading towards genomics being included in the calculation of the docility EBV, and that really selecting and recording that culling of undesirables, recording the trait and using the breeding values, the way to maximize our improvement in temperament. And really that's highlighted by this last slide, which is out of the Tocal beef assessment. It's really about participants understanding how breeding values can be used for selection. And it says that the key to successful animal breeding is the accurate description, and we have that through the breeding value and the collection guidelines and the use of that variation. So we've got to use it in our selection programs to make the gain and to breed the next generation.